In 1956, an architect unveiled a tower 4 times taller than the Empire State. Not because it's gone, because it was never finished. Not one photograph exists, and there's a strange reason why. The architect's name was Frank Lloyd Wright, and by 1956 he was already America's most famous builder. He called his design the Illinois. On paper, it reached 5,280 feet into the sky. That is 1 full mile straight up, 528 floors, stacked one on top of the other. It would have held 100,000 people a day. Wright called it a city in the sky. 76 elevators, 4 highways, a rail line and a rooftop heliport with space for 100 aircraft. 15,000 parking spaces waited beneath what should still be the tallest thing on Earth. Here's the strange part. The man who designed it spent his career calling skyscrapers the problem. Wright hated dense cities. He built his name on the opposite: low houses spread across open land. And the second strange part, he had already tested the wildest piece of it twice. Much smaller. Both of those smaller buildings still stand today. That's why the Illinois almost seemed possible. Wright's real obsession wasn't towers. It was a low-rise vision he called Broadacre City, 1 house per acre. So, why design the biggest skyscraper ever imagined? Wright had an answer, and it was almost sly. If one tower held a whole city's people, the land around it could stay exactly as he wanted. Empty. Concentrate everyone upward, he reasoned, and you free the ground below for parks, farmland, and space to breathe. On October 16, 1956, Wright unveiled the design at a dinner in Chicago's Sherman House Hotel. The illustration alone stood over 25 feet tall, towering over the very guests it was meant to impress. Newspapers around the world picked up the story within days. Some called it visionary, others called it preposterous. But one question followed Wright all week. How do you stop a 1-mile needle snapping in the wind? Every skyscraper sways. At 5,000 feet, even a gentle breeze becomes a structural problem. Wright's answer came from somewhere nobody expected him to look. A forest. In the days right after a storm. Years earlier, Wright had walked through trees flattened by a cyclone and noticed something. Some were still standing. The survivors all shared one thing: roots that plunged straight down instead of spreading wide near the surface. He built that into 2 real towers first, the S.C. Johnson Tower and the Price Tower. Both used a deep central core, driven into the ground like a taproot, with floors cantilevered outward like branches. The Illinois was the same idea, stretched to an almost unbelievable scale. 15 stories of foundation buried underground, alone. For sway, Wright looked at church steeples. A steeple never snaps because nothing pushes back at the top. He shaped it like a tripod, tapering to a point, pressure on one side resisted by the other 2. It's the same wind logic engineers would later use in Toronto's CN Tower. But solving the wind created a new problem. How do you move 100,000 people up a mile? The elevator technology fast enough to make that trip did not exist in 1956. So Wright, never short on confidence, simply invented the elevator he needed. On paper, 76 elevators powered by atomic energy, each car 5 stories tall. A mile in 1 minute. That is 3 times faster than the fastest elevator running anywhere in the world at that time. The elevators were grouped in 5 sets, each one serving its own 100-floor stretch of the tower. Height, wind, and speed. 3 problems the era called unsolvable, answered by one man with a pencil. If these are the stories you want more of, the money and power behind what we build, subscribe. It's the whole reason this channel exists. Because what happens to the Illinois next has nothing to do with engineering. On paper, every number balanced. Wright had an answer for the height, the wind, and the crowds. He had an answer for fire too, and that is the one that has not aged well. Wright said the tower could be emptied in an hour using fire-resistant elevators and escalators below. Today, that logic is close to forbidden. A lift shaft carries smoke upward like a chimney. His own drawings show how far it went. Floor 528, a single elevator shaft. Floor 320 does have a stairway. 1 open flight, no walls, not even a door. Engineers reviewing the design later raised the same doubt. Would the taproot foundation actually hold at that scale? Others questioned whether 76 elevators were really enough to move 100,000 people twice a day. None of these questions killed the project. What killed it was something much simpler and much sadder. No developer ever stepped forward to fund the Illinois. Not in 1956, not after. Martha Linkley Conraged. You'd assume the reason was money. That's still the first guess. It's not quite right. Wright kept working. The Guggenheim Museum was pulling his attention in those final years. On April 9, 1959, Frank Lloyd Wright died. The Illinois died with him, unfinished, unfunded, and unbuilt. No one picked the project back up. There was no one left who believed in it enough. As for the money, today's numbers back up the doubt. The Burj Khalifa is 1/3 this height. It cost roughly $1.5 billion. We took that gamble apart in its own video. A mile-high tower would cost several times that even now, with 70 years of better technology. So the honest answer is both. The economics were brutal, and the one believer ran out of time. Traces of his idea did survive, though, scattered quietly across skylines Wright himself never lived to see. More than 60 years after Wright's death, something happened that nobody could have predicted. In 2023, the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation partnered with an architect named David Romero. Romero built the Illinois in 3 dimensions, producing the first images that looked like real photographs. 67 years after that dinner in Chicago, the building people had only ever imagined finally had a face. I'm Arthur Drumps Rabies Dovlas. It still isn't real. It never poured a foundation, never held a single person. But for the first time you can see it, the mile-high city rendered instead of built. Some buildings are remembered for standing. This one is remembered for how close it came. Which leaves a question worth arguing about. Wright's mile was stopped by money, not physics. So of the buildings we call impossible today, how many actually are? He's hesitated. He said, "Tell me what you'd put on that list." And if you want to see what happens when a tower this ambitious does get funded, that's next.